I'm Paul Nguyen, Director of Education at Blue Arrow Photo Ventures, and I'm going to show you how to use Adobe Photoshop's Clone Stamp and Spot Healing Brush tools to remove spots, blemishes, unwanted artifacts, and even distracting elements from your digital photos. There are times when you've taken a great shot in the camera, but when you open it up in the computer, you notice that there might be some flaws, sometimes subtle, sometimes more obvious, that are holding the image back from being a truly great fine art photograph. It could be something simple, such as some spots that are visible in the sky part of your image, which were the result of dust on your camera sensor or dirt on the front of your lens. Or it could be something much more damaging to the artistic value of your shot, like a distracting signpost in the middle of an otherwise very tranquil scene, or even a tourist walking through the background of your image. Fortunately, Adobe Photoshop has some very powerful tools for quickly and easily removing these unwanted flaws in your photos, and in this tutorial, I'm going to walk you through how to use them. Let's open up a Photoshop file that we've already been working on. This file contains an image layer or pixel layer on the bottom, which in this case is the photograph that I took, and then a stack of adjustment layers on top of it that alter the look of the photograph. If you're not familiar with adjustment layers and what they do, be sure to watch my tutorial that focuses specifically on adjustment layers. The important thing to remember about cloning and spot removal is that it can only be done on pixel layers and not on adjustment layers. The Clone Stamp and Spot Healing Brush tools need actual pixel data to sample from, and adjustment layers contain no pixel data. Also keep in mind that you can't use these tools on smart objects either, such as RAW files. If you have a smart object you want to fix the blemishes on, you have to first convert it to a pixel layer, or rasterize it in Photoshop terms. And to do this, you would right-click on the Smart Object layer and select Rasterize Layer. But since I don't want to do my fixes directly on this Smart Object layer, I'm just going to leave it alone right now. You can choose to do blemish removal either at the beginning of your editing workflow or at the end. And I prefer to do it at the end because by that time I've spent a good long while staring at the photo and I've found all the bad spots that need to be fixed. So to use the Clone Stamp or Spot Healing Brush tools on this photograph, I'm going to want to make a pixel layer that sits on top of all of my other layers and looks like a copy of my photograph that has all the adjustments incorporated into it. It basically merges my photograph with all of the adjustment layers and creates one layer. To do that, I select my top layer to tell Photoshop that I want to merge this top layer and the ones beneath it. And then, this is tricky, I hold down Shift, Command, and Option, and then press E on my keyboard. This is when I'm using a Mac, but on PC it would be Shift, Control, Alt, and then E. Or alternately, you could hold down Option or Alt on PC, and then go to Layer and Merge Visible, which would accomplish the same thing. Now you see that I've merged all my layers onto this top layer while all my original layers are still there. Anytime you want to do edits on pixel layers, this method of merging everything to a new layer is a great way to make sure you don't do any permanent damage to your existing layers, because this top layer is a copy that you can throw away later if you don't like it. On top of this layer, I'll then add a new blank layer. This blank layer will hold all the new pixel data that is going to be created during this cloning and spot removal process. The process essentially creates new pixels that cover up the old ones, and these new pixels have to be stored somewhere, and so they can either be stored on the existing layer or on a new layer. Anytime you get a chance to put an edit on a new and separate layer, definitely take that opportunity, because it's much easier to get rid of it later without affecting anything else if you eventually change your mind. Make sure the blank layer on top is highlighted because that means this is the layer we're working on. So now it's important to understand the two major tools that you'll be using to clean up the blemishes in your photos. The Clone Stamp tool takes pixels from one part of the image and puts them on top of another part of the image. So you can take pixels from a clean part of your image and place them on top of a blemish. The Spot Healing Brush takes pixels from an area surrounding a blemish and attempts to automatically blend them into the blemished area, taking into account the texture and color and luminosity of the area. I find that for small, simple spots, marks, or lines, the Spot Healing Brush works very well, whereas for more complex or large artifacts that need to be removed, like a distracting sign or a person that doesn't belong, the Clone Stamp tool gives better results, whereas the Spot Healing Brush might make some mistakes. Let's start with the easier of the two, the Spot Healing Brush for removing simple blemishes. When I select the Spot Healing Brush tool, I want to make sure Content Aware is selected and that Sample All Layers is selected. Select a brush hardness of 100%, which usually works very well. Select a size for your brush that is just a tiny bit bigger than your blemish. I'm going to clean up this debris down here at the bottom of the frame. As always, the size of your brush can be adjusted with the bracket keys on your keyboard. Hover over the debris with your brush and then click on it. And the Spot Healing Brush tool automatically cleans up the area by blending the surrounding pixels over the debris, creating a seamless look. The Content Aware option that I selected means Photoshop is intelligently calculating what content to put into this area based on the surrounding area. And the Sample All Layers option means that I'm taking pixel data from all the layers in this stack and putting them onto this new layer that I'm currently working on. Next, I'm going to get rid of this distracting sign that's just killing the tranquil vibe of this scene. I switch now to the Clone Stamp tool. The options I want to select here are Aligned and either Sample All Layers or Current and Below. For this tool, I find a brush hardness of 0 works better. The Clone Stamp tool is a bit more complex than the Spot Healing Brush tool because here I need to choose a source area where pixels are going to be sampled from. I would choose a source that looks like what I want my target area to look like. In this case, I would choose plain grass as my source. To select the source area, I hold Option or Alt on a PC, which turns my cursor into a little bullseye. Then I click on the source area. This takes a sample of the source area. Then I release the Option key. When I now paint over my sign here, it's painting grass from the source area over the target area. Because I checked the Aligned option, the source continues to move in parallel with where the cursor is now, so it's actually taking pixels from new areas as I move the brush. I want to do this cloning project as a series of shorter brush strokes where I let go of the mouse button in between the strokes rather than one continuous pass, because this way it keeps refreshing the sampling area as I go along, which produces a cleaner result. If you don't release your mouse button, you'll end up cloning the unwanted pixels onto the target area. If you find that the cloning job is starting to produce some repeating patterns, which are a dead giveaway that some cloning has been done here, and bad cloning at that, then occasionally you'll want to move to a different source area and take a new sample, painting over the repetitive patterns to produce a more natural look. There we go, we're done. Looks pretty good. If you go over to the Layers palette, you'll see that the top layer I created now contains all the new pixel data I generated from the Clone Stamp and Spot Healing Brush work I did. If I turn off the visibility of all the other pixel layers, you'll see just the new pixels we created. So you see, this method of putting all your cloning and spot removal onto a new layer is a great way to keep these particular edits compartmentalized and separate from your other types of edits. You might now find that you don't need this layer just underneath that you use to sample pixels from, so you can keep that layer invisible or even delete it to save space in your file. So now you know how you can use Photoshop's Clone Stamp and Spot Healing Brush tools to rescue your images from simple blemishes and more obvious distractions. The practice of taking obvious things out of your photographs is somewhat controversial because purists would say that you shouldn't be altering your photographs in this way. But the argument in favor of it is that in this day and age, there's an increasing number of man-made things like cars, planes, and signs that are popping up in areas that used to look pristine. And there's an increasing number of people visiting and cluttering up picturesque sites that sometimes it's impossible to get a clean and pure shot of a landscape subject, even when you do everything else right. So these tools that I told you about today can help you to simply remove the clutter and create a classic looking and timeless image. I'm Paul Nguyen of Blue Hour Photo Ventures, and I thank you for joining me.